Do the Denver Broncos and Seattle Seahawks have that big of an advantage being the number 1 seed? I'm going to be talking about more of this and the divisional round matchups in general right after the intro. Thank you for tuning in to podcast number 81 of Sports Talk with JWock. I am your host, Jonah Walkenfoos, and like you saw from the intro, or heard from the intro, I'm going to be talking about whether or not the number 1 seed is really that big of an advantage, especially in this year. But first off, let's talk about some of the crazy wildcard games that went down this last weekend. If you didn't watch, I'll be kind of giving you a little update on how the games went and what the scores were. So the Saturday games, we saw the Rams playing the Panthers in Carolina. The Rams went and beat them 34-31. Not really a surprise to anyone for the Rams winning. I do think there was a little bit of a surprise seeing the Panthers staying in that game for that long. And the whole game, like they really had a chance to win that game. It came down to the final drive and just the Panthers were cut short. They just really couldn't get the ball down the field. And unfortunately, they took the loss. But for the Panthers, it is a promising thing to see that your young team is starting to fight and compete against some of the better teams in the league. And that gives some promise going into next year and a little more clarity of what they can and cannot do in this offseason. But overall, yes, the Rams won 34-31. The Rams are moving on. It was a little bit of an ugly game for the Rams, but hey, a win is a win. And then the second game, probably the better game of the two, in my opinion, where we saw the Bears playing the Packers in Chicago. The Packers were up 21-3 at one point, and they blew their lead and lost 31-27 to the Bears. The Bears were looking really rough in the first half. I mean, Caleb Williams was missing throws. I think it was one time Caleb Williams threw a pick wide open to a Packers defender where there was no receiver in sight. Luther Burden, I believe, was his intended target. You know, there's could be debate that Luther Burden ran the wrong route, which is very much possible. So just miscommunication in the first half. It was just rough all around. The Bears turn it around and they come back and win that game. Now they get to host the Rams in Chicago in the divisional round on Sunday. We'll be talking about that matchup in a little bit. But anyways, let's get on to the Sunday games where we had 3 games. The first game was the Bills going to Jacksonville and beating them 27-24. Unfortunately for me, in the last episode, I picked last minute. Like, I was literally on the verge of saying the Bills were going to win, and then I ended up choosing the Jaguars to win. That ended up not going well. The Bills beat the Jaguars 27-24. I'm not really shocked by this. I do think the Jaguars were an interesting team. They were beating very good teams. Unfortunately, they just ran out of that hot streak. So the Bills end up winning. Josh Allen is just an unbelievable quarterback. He got beat up that game for sure, but he ended up winning, and now he has to go to the Mile High City and play the Denver Broncos. That's going to be a tough one for him, but it's not going to be easy for the Broncos. And like I said, we'll be talking about these divisional matchups soon. But the next game, we saw the 49ers beat the Eagles in Philadelphia 23-19. I thought that the Eagles were going to be able to win this game. I even predicted that they would win. But the 49ers beat them 23-19. Unfortunately for San Francisco, George Kittle ruptured his Achilles. He's out for the rest of this playoffs, obviously, and possibly all of next season. So that's a huge loss for the 49ers. But they're still a resilient and good team. They've dealt with a ton of injuries all season long. So this is nothing new to them. I'm kind of shocked with this one. I thought the Eagles were going to be able to start to figure it out, but who knows? This could be AJ Brown. That could have been AJ Brown's last game as an Eagle. We'll just have to wait and see how this offseason pans out for them. But the final game, kind of the worst game at that moment, the Patriots-Chargers. Like, this game was boring. I watched this whole game. The Patriots won 16-3. Both offenses were just struggling to get down the field. The second half, Drake May really started to operate a little better, getting the Patriots offense down the field a little more. But this was just a gritty game where the Patriots pull it out. Justin Herbert has yet to win another playoff game, and people are starting to call him If Man. If you haven't seen that picture, look it up. Just look up on like Google, Justin Herbert, quote unquote, If Man. It's funny because there's so many things where it's like, if Justin Herbert had this or this or this, they would have won. Well, that's been happening for the past few years. Let's be real. Conversations might have to be held about Justin Herbert and his ability to carry teams into the playoffs and win games. So I'm interested to see how that goes. But then the final game we had on Monday night, we saw the Texans just blow out the Steelers 30-6. That could be Aaron Rodgers' last game in the NFL. That could be interesting. That could be the last game of a legend at quarterback for Aaron Rodgers. Great career overall. I think this probably is his last game. You could just tell Aaron Rodgers is just I just don't think he really wants to play anymore. He already won a Super Bowl. It's not like he never won a championship, so he can ride into the sunset knowing that he won a championship. So we'll just have to wait and see. But anyways, that was all the wild card matchups. And after this break, we're going to be talking about the divisional matchups and my predictions to possibly get to the AFC and NFC championship. Okay, and for the final topic, we're going to be talking about the divisional matchups and as to whether or not being the number one seed truly is an advantage or not. So let's talk about the matchups real quick, and then we'll kind of go into that. So for the Saturday games, we're seeing both the number one seeds playing, where we see the Bills going to Denver to play the Broncos, and then the 49ers going to Seattle to play the Seahawks. So I'm going to just give my opinions real quick on how I think these games will go, and then I'll also give my opinion on how like the number one seed and like the importance of the number one seed. So first up, we have the first game of that day where it's the Bills going to play the Denver Broncos, my favorite team. This is a game that I'm very nervous about. Probably the one team other than maybe the Texans that I really didn't want the Broncos to play, but it is what it is. You're in the playoffs. You got to play a tough team at some point. The Denver Broncos played the Bills last year. It really didn't go very well for the Broncos. They had that one nice play at the beginning where Bo Nix threw a nice deep ball to Troy Franklin, but outside of that, it really didn't go very well. This is a bounce back game for the Broncos. You know, they're going to have a chip on their shoulder. It feels like everybody in the world is picking the Bills to win this game. And honestly, I could see why. I mean, you have Josh Allen on your team. He's an excellent player and deserves a ton of credit for what he's done with this Buffalo team, considering they don't really have a true wide receiver one. So it's very interesting to see how the Bills have been playing. But I do think the Broncos will pull this game out. I think they will win. I think the big key to this game is if the Broncos can stop James Cook and Josh Allen, the two key players on their offense. James Cook has been excellent on the running game. The Broncos are going to have to be on him, and adding players like Greenlaw and Franklin Myers again to get them back into this game is going to be key. So, and they're going to be really helpful in the run game. So I think that's going to be really beneficial for the Broncos, along with limiting Josh Allen. You know, Josh Allen, he's a great thrower, but he's also a great runner. So they're going to have to probably keep a spy on him all game. And hopefully our inside linebackers can get the job done and limit him to a decent amount. Overall, like I said, I do think the Broncos will win. But let's go on to the second game where the 49ers are going to Seattle to play the Seahawks. The 49ers have had a great run. Unfortunately, George Kittle went down with an Achilles tear, and he will be done. That's a huge loss for San Francisco, and I think with him, they would have maybe had a chance to beat the Seahawks, but I do think Seattle's going to pull this one out. I think the key to this game is going to be turnovers. Who can force the most turnovers? And Seattle's defense has done well at that this season. Along with, I also think Sam Darnold's going to have to be the X factor. He hasn't yet really shown that he can perform in the playoffs, but this is a big chance for him to perform at the highest level he's played at, I believe, in his entire career. But overall, I do think the Broncos will move on, and then the Seahawks. And let's talk about the number one seed dilemma, because in my opinion, this year, I feel like the NFL playoffs is wide open for anyone to take it and win the Super Bowl. That just makes everything so much more interesting. For these two teams, the Denver Broncos and Seattle Seahawks, getting the number 1 seed, I think is so important for them. And I do think it gives them a slight advantage because they do have a whole week off to rest from week 18, especially since a lot of those players, even if they're healthy, are going to be banged up. They're going to be tired. And this is just a great opportunity to get some extra work in the training room, just being able to get your body right, along with being able to watch film on the team that you'll be able to go against in the coming week. So I do think that gives a little bit of an advantage, but that could also lead to these two teams starting off a little bit slow because they haven't played football now in 2 weeks. So, and we saw that the Denver Broncos specifically coming out of their bye week, they played the Commanders on, I believe, Sunday night. That was a close game. The Commanders were not necessarily a great team. They were very injured, and the Broncos barely pulled out a win in overtime against them because Nick Bonito batted down the 2-point conversion. So we'll have to see how both of these teams come out as they've had, like I said, 2 weeks off. But I do think it gives them an advantage. I mean, having a more healthy team is going to help a ton. So that's going to be interesting. And I do think that having the number 1 seed is an advantage, but it isn't like an immortality thing where it's like you're automatically going to win, if that makes sense. But anyways, let's get on to the other 2 games where we have the Texans going to New England to play the Patriots. That's going to be an interesting game. We did get news, I believe, that Nico Collins is going to be out for this game against the Patriots. That's a huge loss for the Texans. So I do think the Patriots will win this game. Their offense, the Patriots offense was a little questionable in that Chargers game, but I think they'll be able to bounce back. Mike Vrabel is a great coach. I think he's going to get them ready and fired up for that game. Along with, I just feel like the Texans offense in general is just going to really hold back how good their defense truly is. And I think that's just going to be a huge, huge factor to this game as to whether or not the Texans can win or not, is if CJ Stroud can get that offense going. And I just don't know if they have enough. And then the final game, we have the Rams going to Chicago, the Windy City, to play the Bears. That's going to be an interesting game. I think the Bears are going to lose this game. I think the Rams are going to win. I'm still sticking to the team that I think will win the Super Bowl, like I predicted in last episode. I think this Rams offense is just too good, in my opinion. I think Stafford, he's good enough of a veteran to be able to get the job done. And we'll just have to wait and see, but I think he's going to be a key player to this game. And then it's going to be who's going to guard Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. That's going to be the big question mark for the Bears. They do have a respectable defense, but it's going to be tough. If Caleb Williams could pull this one out, though, that would be huge. But anyways, that's going to be the end of podcast number 81 of Sports Talk with JWock. In my AFC Championship, I have the Broncos hosting the New England Patriots, and then I have the Seahawks hosting the Rams. Let me know what you guys think down below. Drop your predictions down below on who you think will make it. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Sports Talk with JWock. I can't thank you enough for all the support you guys have had done for me. This year, I'm going to be trying to be much more committed and trying to push getting more subscribers, more viewership, and just stuff. So if you want, if you'd like, hit the like button, subscribe, share this video with your friends and family. I really appreciate it. Last episode, I believe we got over 70 views, which is something I have not done in a long time on this channel. So thank you guys so much for the support. Let's keep it going. Let's try to get to 100 views in one of these videos. But yeah, drop down below your favorite team. And if your favorite team is still active and your favorite team is still alive in the playoffs, so drop it down below. Let me know who you are rooting for in the playoffs and what your AFC and NFC matchups are going to look like. You can follow me on all social media platforms. You can go down below in the description, and I'll have all of those down there. So if you want to check me out on all those platforms, you can. But anyways, I hope you all have an amazing week. God bless.